Hey guys, what's up? Pellet back with another video, and today we're going to be looking at Shadow Priest and your secondary stats and just in general stats overall inside of Shadowlands. I've done a lot of stat simming, just kind of in general, feeling out what gear works best out for us right now. And I wanted to make a video just kind of discussing some things because we've got some pretty significant changes, not only to like Priest in general, but to how gearing your character works in Shadowlands. So I'm going to TLDR a lot of that in this video and kind of give you a heads up of what to expect going into Shadowlands. Again, this is all pretty, beta, preliminary, so things could change, but this is what it looks like right now. All right, let's get started. Okay, so what changed inside of Shadowlands? Well, the first thing is we got a level squish, right? So at max level inside the Shadowlands, you are at level 60. So with that, they've squished item levels, stats, the whole 9 yards, right? So off the bat, this is definitely the biggest change that we've seen. We are kind of resetting some of our stats back to what we did see kind of pre-BFA, all the way back in the older expansions. So now I will say, while leveling, you did feel this kind of change in your stats. Like, it didn't feel super great playing with kind of lower stats as you leveled up. It wasn't quite as bad as leveling in BFA, if you remember that. But still, that happened. If you want more details on that exact level squish or what they did, I'll link the Wowhead post in the description. So right off the bat, they've kind of changed some of the formulas of how we get more stats when we get gear, what eye level means, all that good stuff, right? And in addition to that, the other major change going into Shadowlands was they added diminishing returns to secondary stats. So what that means is if you just keep stacking a singular stat, so let's say you go balls to the wall and haste, right? What that means is as you approach this 25% threshold and then it actually scales exponentially past that, you're getting less percentage of haste per point that you're adding, right? I'll link the chart here. It is a little interesting depending on the stat you're looking at. Just know that for haste, versatility, and crit, this is just a one-tiered level thing. So hitting 25% is basically that first cutoff where now everything needs 10% extra points to give you that full percentage value. Now, I've still, been kind of playing around with like what this means for Priest. We'll get that into a second. But basically, the TLDR here is that once you hit that threshold for any one of these 4 stats, you actually kind of want that stat a bit less than you would otherwise, which is really important. So as we gain more stats, think about what you're doing, because this actually could change. Hey, I actually just hit 25% haste. Maybe I need to change an enchant or something else because of how our stats work out. Now, just to note, we're still testing this, but Mastery does work a little differently here. Every class in the game has a Mastery rating conversion tied to your Mastery. I guess I should say spec. And since Shadow just got a new Mastery, I think this is important to bring up since Mastery is looking to be one of our better stats. The conversion rating is different, right? So for that, the Mastery is actually, it's a 0.5 conversion rating when you're going into that actual Mastery value to the rating to percent. So what that means is, we're still validating this, it's hard to get a lot of gear on beta. We're pretty sure what this means is that at 12.5% is that cutoff because our conversion rating is 0.5, right? So it's actually cutting that guy in half. So theoretically, you should see a bit of a drop off in Mastery's value past 12.5%. Or in theory, just because you're getting less of a full stat value if you would have put that 25 somewhere where you weren't fully at that yet. So this is really, really important to think about when you're gearing your character. Okay, so let's kind of move on to what this means for your Shadow Priest. Okay, so first off, let's look at our stat weights. Right now, this is actually really, really simple. This is actually going to be great for those of you that have been kind of wondering about the complicatedness of what we had to deal with in BFA or Legion. But actually, right now, intellect is king, right? I'm surprised. I've never really seen this before for Shadow specifically, but because of the squish, because of everything else, intellect is about 2.5 times better than any other secondary stat for Priest right now, which is pretty significant. This really hasn't happened before, and nothing we've really seen. But what this means is gearing actually becomes much, much simpler for Priest. You're essentially just saying, yeah, I just want eye level, actually. You don't care as much as the secondaries as you used to. We used to drop upwards of 20, 30 item levels, especially on like rings and stuff for haste and crit. Those days are gone. We're probably not going to do that very much in only very specific scenarios when we're not losing intellect or using a lot of it. But yeah, this should theoretically streamline gearing. Obviously, we don't quite know for sure, but for right now, it's going to be pretty obvious to say, does it have better eye level and therefore has more intellect? Yeah, I probably want that over what I'm using. Now, if we look past intellect for a second, so let's assume everything's the same eye level, same intellect value. What's our secondary stat of choice? So right now, it's pretty much looking like haste and mastery are our top 2 stats that we care the most about. Haste a bit less so as we get to kind of the single target scenarios. Mastery does kind of inch out haste more on those single target fights, But as we add more targets and theoretically we're adding more and more dots, more and more things, we don't have as much uptime as our full all 3 dots up on all targets thing. So mastery does fall off a little bit more there. But if you keep haste and mastery pretty equal, that's what all the sims are saying you should try to do. That's kind of your go-to point there, right? So we start out with haste and mastery being equal, and then crit and verse kind of fall into this other category of like, they're fine. They don't have a whole lot of interaction with our spec, obviously, but you know, as far as one or the other, they're all both kind of the same. So general priority is intellect greater than haste. Haste and mastery are equal to each other, and then crit and verse are the next kind of tier lower than that. So now to be very clear though, this is assuming you're not hitting above those thresholds, right? Once you get into this area of where like you've started to cross over, hey, now I have more than 25% haste, hey, now I have more mastery, whatever it is, these stats do kind of realign themselves, right? So I did a sim where I gave it 25% haste exactly, just to kind of see what the stat weights look like. And what that actually means is haste actually dropped 10%, right? Its value dropped by 10%, which because of our secondaries being so close together, they're actually not that far apart, that actually bumped haste from being tied with mastery in that kind of first place tier to just below crit and verse, meaning our worst stat. So theoretically right now what this is actually looking into is you kind of want to tunnel into haste and mastery until you get to those thresholds, and then you just kind of start adding stats to make sure you get under those thresholds as much as possible, just because of how close these secondaries are together. So it might actually mean that, you know, we don't actually care as much about everything being haste mastery. We might actually want to throw some crit and verse in there. That way we're getting full value out of adding those stats to our gear, and it's not necessarily kind of fading away in these kind of diminishing returns. So that's what it's looking like right now. You know, things could change, but kind of keep in mind these thresholds are going to be very, very important going into Shadowlands and kind of helping you gear your character. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so before we wrap up here, I do want to give a couple quick notes here. So this does actually change a bit about the racial balancing of those racial bonuses that we have inside of World of Warcraft. So just a quick note, all those racials that we kind of ignored or didn't really care about because they weren't great, things like Void Elf, Dark Iron Dwarf, all the Draenei racials, or even Panda with the Intellect Feast, these all got a lot better, right? So they're not like significantly ahead of everything except for Panda because it's really bugged right now with the Feast, but that's not important. Basically, Intellect became so much better now, so all these racials that are giving us 1% Intellect or whatever it is with spell damage, all that good stuff, are actually turning out to be very, very strong. Now, they're only like 0.5% at most, better than other secondaries or secondary increases or other racials that we have in the game. But I did kind of want to note, if you're playing some of these racials, or maybe you've been turned off playing Dark Iron Dwarf or Panda or Draenei, whatever it is, because the racials haven't been that good, that's not really a thing anymore. Those intellect racials are actually among the best ones that we actually have. So especially if you're on Alliance side, you guys have a lot of options here. So don't shy away from those bonuses. You don't always have to be a goblin. That's not necessarily the case. So just want to call that out. That's pretty important here. So guys, as we wrap up this video, I just want to do a couple of quick roundups here. So first things first, intellect is king with our stats going to Shadowlands. That much is probably not going to be changing. Again, about 2.5 times better than all of our other secondaries. There will be lots of sims coming. I'm working on them right now. I'm just super busy these days with sims. So check the links in the description for updated links to the sims that I'm doing for Shadowlands. I have done stat distribution sims, working on full stat weight sims now, kind of ranging different builds to see, hey, maybe the stat gets a little better or worse depending on your covenant choice or whatever. So we'll see what happens there. And then just kind of TLDR with your stat weights again, just to reiterate. So you want intellect over everything, then grab kind of haste mastery equal to each other, but make sure you stay below those thresholds or kind of even them out towards the other secondaries, guys. So that's how stats are looking in Shadowlands. Hope you guys are excited as I am. Let's move on, and I'll see you in the next video.